I went back and found the Wall Street Journal editorial from April 24th, 2009. Austin Goolsbee vindication. Obama backtracks on NAFTA as his economic advisor said he would. Obama campaigned on renegotiating NAFTA. Austin Goolsbee and these other purists on trade said, oh, no, you can't do that. And here we are all these years later, Donald Trump having become president of the United States in the throes of this NAFTA renegotiation and already renegotiated the Korean free trade deal, brought China to the table yesterday, huge concessions already made by China. They don't want these tariffs. So tariffs actually were really important. And the threat of tariffs, or maybe you get an exemption, a slight decrease of tariffs for certain countries if they do certain things. But you gotta level this playing field for the American worker and the American people. A man who's been so far ahead of this issue and so many others is Pat Buchanan. On my sheet, Pat, it says, these are all kids working for me. On the sheet, it says, paleo-conservative author, like you're a dinosaur or something. Commentator and columnist. Oh, Pat, come on. The kids, we got to teach the kids here, Pat. How are you?
The kids got the internet, and that's what it says.
Oh, my goodness. Paleo. I haven't heard that in a while. Paleo-conservative. So, Pat, it was fun last night with Goolsbee. He's a good guy, but he's just
I saw it. I watched it.
Oh, you did?
Before I went to sleep.
All right. Well, what is your thought on how Trump is doing on trade and the old cliches that are being thrown around? To me, it seems like they're not really holding a lot of weight anymore.
Well, I think what Trump is doing, I applaud. He's using tariffs and the threat of tariffs in order to get better trade deals with the United States. My own view would be that what we need, just take the overall since the 1990s, say since Bush won, the United States has run $12 trillion in trade deficits with the world. We run last year very close to $800 billion in merchandise trade deficits. Now, to eliminate those massive deficits, which are the result of all the trade deals and the practices that have grown up over 40 years, that's a long-range thing, Laura. And my view would have been to start with, say, a 5% overall tariff on manufactured goods, use every dime in revenue to cut taxes on American corporations and producers here, and gradually take it up to 20% overall with the world, and then do what the president is doing, take ad hoc situations like the cheating the communist Chinese have been doing has been relentless, and then go with those ad hoc approaches. But I do think this is going to be a long process. The key question is whether the American people and the American polity, if you will sustain it the way we did under Hamilton and Clay and Lincoln and McKinley and Teddy Roosevelt and the great Fordney-McCumber tariff in the early 1920s.
Well, it's interesting to see the president's approval numbers, even in the CNN polls, the highest it's been in 11 months. He's up at 42. Rasmussen has him at 48. Gallup has him at 45, 46. So
that's outstanding.
Yeah,
that's
interesting.
Outstanding. I thought he'd been in the sort of upper 30s with the major polls, except for Rasmussen. But that's outstanding. I think people realize that for all his flaws and failings, that Donald Trump is fighting for the country.
And I think what happened with the tariffs is, again, he gets very frustrated with the pace of things and in how long it takes for the government to really move. And that's coming from someone outside the government. They haven't been around this town like you and I have, Pat. And so he wanted stuff done. So I think he announced those tariffs a little bit prematurely and, targeting them, a little bit more specifically might have been better. But I can tell you this from the standpoint of what we've already gotten from the Europeans, what we totally got from Korea, and what we're getting from the Chinese is stunning. I mean, they're now allowing the car manufacturers to have double the number of cars each coming into Korea, 50,000 each, which is again doubling the amount. And then they can even send more, but the extra ones have to comply with their emission standards. So there's a lot that they've gotten with these tariffs in a short period of time.
sure. You got the Chinese had $500 billion in sales to the United States and a $375 billion trade surplus. They don't want to see that at risk. If Trump gets tough, they don't want a trade war, because the truth is, a trade war, all-out trade war where you shut down ports in both countries would be a general disaster, but there's no doubt who would be hurt worse. And Korea and China have huge trade surpluses they want to defend. And so that's why Trump's action is getting a response. And the same with the Europeans.
Yeah, the FCC announced today that they want Chinese tech out of U.S. phones and routers because their examination of how the technology was inserted into various pieces of equipment, Pat, no big shock that the ability to monitor U.S. communications and monitor U.S. computer systems, phone systems, is real. And so Ajit Pai, who's a terrific FCC commissioner, announced this because of threats to national security posed by certain communications equipment providers are a matter of bipartisan concern, hidden backdoors, and so forth.
People ought to recognize that in the long term, China, with 1.4 billion people, is far greater menace to the United States than Russia, with 140 million people. And
Thank
China,
you.
Second largest economy in the world. It is booming, running massive trade surpluses, and it is a program for basically conquering politically, economically, and strategically all of Asia and much of Europe and Africa and all of it. That is the long-term challenge to the United States of America. And with due respect, it's not Vladimir Putin.
No, and people are enraged because Trump hasn't said more about Vladimir Putin, even though they just expelled all those Russian diplomats, 60 diplomats, which I'm not sure what that's going to accomplish. But we expelled a bunch of diplomats, and now they're still. New York Times says not enough. They never helped us when we needed them, Pat. Though back in the 80s,
I remember during the Cold War they didn't seem quite as hawkish.
Yes.
With the Soviet Union, the Bolshevik Soviet Union, but now they are. So but I don't understand. One thing about this, the British, as I understand it, have not conclusively figured out who brought the poison in, where exactly it came from. The Russians continue to deny emphatically they did it. And if you take a look at it, it's been entirely a loss for Putin. They've lost diplomats. They got sanctions imposed on them. They've lost any reputation they have in the West. They're being accused of murder. For what? To kill a woman who was a Russian citizen who was going in and out, 33 years old, and to kill some guy, attempt to kill some guy whom Putin himself let go? I am not persuaded that as the British foreign minister says, that Putin ordered it.
Yeah, you're like me. I always think, what's the motive? And I raised this, Pat, over the weekend with an old friend who used to do a lot in Central America with the Contras. And he said, and he knows these, he's someone that you know, but I won't say his name. But anyway, so he said, well, Laura, what Putin could have gotten out of it is more support domestically, because the nationalistic fervor in Russia is really strong now. And Putin just continues to build up his ego, his burnish his reputation as I'll strike anywhere.
Why would you do something which you have to scream and deny for 4 weeks afterwards? We didn't do it. We had no role.
That's what I said. I think it's odd.
It's the old Latin phrase, cui bono. For whose benefit? Who benefits from this act? And the ones that have benefited most from it are the Putin haters and the anti-Putin characters in the New York Times, which can get on their high horse and say, let's break relations.
Yeah, if I were writing the novel, it would be some rogue CIA guy who tried to knock these people off to keep the deep state against Trump or something. That would be the novel that I would, then make it really interesting.
I think it could be rogue KGB or KGB guys who are bitter that this guy was let go and they went after this guy.
Yeah.
But obviously they cannot be, it seems to me, pro-Putin, because any fool would know what the reaction to this is going to be.
We're talking to Pat Buchanan here on the Laura Ingraham Show. Pat, the U.S. Census is going to start asking a question related to citizenship status, and there's already been a lawsuit last night dropped to try to stop this. Of course, from California, in a federal district court in California. That this is even controversial is stunning.
Exactly. What is controversial about asking folks if, look, are you here on a tourist visa? Are you here on a work visa? Are you a citizen? Or, by the way, did you break into our country? I mean, to ask people their citizenship status is a perfectly legitimate component of the whole census.
Well, a friend of mine just texted me and said, "End of civilization alert." I mean, the fact that we can't ask a question, can't have a border, can't do that, can't have a wall, you can't deport people just because they're here illegally. You have to, it's all of that.
Not to be too dramatic, but look, if you don't first identify and secure and protect and defend your border, whether it's the border of the continent of Europe and the Mediterranean Sea or the border of the United States along the 1,900 miles from San Diego to Brownsville, that's the end of the country. I mean, if you get so many folks walking through and you can no longer pass politically in a democratic government a border fence or border security or keep people from entering, what is to stop the third world from walking into your entire country endlessly? What is to prevent that in the long term? And as Reagan said, if the borders cease to exist, it isn't really a country anymore. This is what is behind the Brexit thing. It's the sense of the English people mainly, that they wanted to remain the English people, their own selves, their own unique, different country. As Solzhenitsyn said, every single small people, no matter how small, is basically part of the face of God. And they were created that way. And what is wrong with seeking to maintain who we are?
No, it's a heartbreak. I mean, it's a heartbreak for our future generations. They're not going to have any knowledge really of the way the country was because it's not going to be taught in school. In fact, they're arguing at Hofstra that it's time to pull down a Thomas Jefferson statue because he's just another racist slave owner. So Jefferson is now under attack. When you start pulling down statues, you got the folks who came out of Europe and basically, quote, discovered the Western Hemisphere in North and South America, and then colonized the country, and then created the United States of America, the greatest experiment in history, where a lot of them believe ideas that we no longer believe today, of course. But you're going to have to, I don't know how many statues are going to be left. Oh, my gosh, exactly. There'll be no one.
All my Confederate ancestors are going.
I went to this, I've got to pull it up. I was at this 4-car ferry over the weekend from Maryland. I think it's White's Ferry or something like that. It's from
White's Ferry up in the Potomac River?
Yeah. Yeah, so you know it. Okay. I've never been to that little cute ferry before. It's so cute. And it goes from Maryland over to Virginia. And I was just driving with the kids. We're just driving. And so we get across the ferry. So, it takes 5 seconds. It's on a cable, actually. It's not even a motorboat. It's on a cable. Right. We get across, and I say to my kids, what's that? There's a statue on the other side of the ferry. What is it? So I got out of the car, and it had a chain link fence around it. And it said from 1861 to 1865, to our heroes of Montgomery County, Maryland, that we through life may not forget to love the thin gray line. Erected 1913. And it's no particular person, but it's a beautiful bronze of a...
Right, that's where the Confederates crossed up near there. They crossed at, I think it was around Harper's Ferry.
Harper's Ferry.
You had to cross over into Maryland for the Battle of Antietam Creek, known as Sharpsburg. I think in the one side identified the towns, the other identifies the river or the creek. But that's the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil, was Sharpsburg or Antietam Creek.
We got out and we said a prayer for our country and for knowledge and healing and context and all of that. So, Pat Buchanan, you have a wonderful Easter. Have a happy Easter and Holy Week, and we just adore you. And give our best to Shelley, please.
Thank you, my friend. Take it easy.
All right,
Bye-bye.
We'll talk to you soon.